Welcome to part 2 of Stan Cullis. Before I carry on, will you please subscribe and hit the notification button. England humbled by Hungary in 1953. Background to Cullis' claim that Wolves were champions of the world. Wright and Puskás lead their teams out at Wembley on November 25th, 1953. There can be no words to adequately describe the feelings of the 100,000 fans on a dull grey November afternoon. The game, which will be talked about for as long as football is played in these islands, produced one of the most exciting and breathtaking team performances the world has ever seen. A few details of a great game. The disappointment that was felt by England at last losing their long and distinguished unbeaten home record against continental opposition was tempered by the knowledge that the record was finally taken by such a superb team. The current Olympic champions were simply magnificent, winning 6-3. Billy Wright, the England and Wolves captain, was infamously likened to a fire engine going to the wrong fire by Geoffrey Green in the Times. Hungary would lose in the '54 World Cup final against West Germany in controversial circumstances when Ferenc Puskás accused them of receiving drug injections from a Russian doctor at half-time, an accusation that was eventually proved correct. And that was the only game they lost in 6 years. England, it was Merrick, Ramsey, Eckersley, Wright, Johnson, Dickinson, Matthews, Taylor, Mortensen, Sewell and Robb, and the ones after were the goal scorers. Hungary, Grosic, Bozanski, Lantos, Bocik, Laurent, Zacharias, Budaj, Košis, Hideguti, Puskás and Seaboard. The highlighted players all played for Honved, who would of course face Wolverhampton Wanderers in 1954. England humbled by Hungary in 1954. 6 months earlier at Wembley, England had been given a football lesson by the magnificent Magyars. It was hoped that many lessons would have been learned from the experience. Sadly, on this performance against the same team, few would believe they had learned any, as they were totally outclassed. Hungary simply tore them apart with some devastating football and scored virtually at will. England played like a group of individuals while Puskás pulled all the strings. And you can see Merrick is well beaten for the Hungarians' 5th goal scored by Toth. More pain endured in 1954. Quick, accurate, short passing was coupled with lethal long passes, which totally bemused an overworked England defence in a 7-1 defeat. The old-fashioned tactics that England employed were shown up to be woefully inadequate by the slick pattern of the Hungarian formation. The England team there was Merrick, Staniforth, Byrne, Wright, Owen and Dickinson, Harris, Sewell, Jezard, Brodis, who scored the goal, and Tom Finney. And I talked to Ivor Brodis in the last 10 years before he sadly died, and he was a wonderful player, and he said it was a nightmare. Hungary, Grosic, Bozanski, Lantos, Bocik, Laurent, Zacharias, Toth, he was the only change from the Wembley game, Košič, Hideguti, Puskás and Seaboard. Unfortunately, the fact that this ranks as England's biggest ever defeat will most certainly never be forgotten. England's next game was against Belgium in the World Cup 3 weeks later, that ended 4-4. England had made 3 changes to this side, and it was Matthews, Lofthouse and Tommy Taylor being brought in, and for an hour England were magnificent. lights come on at Molineux. Molineux's new floodlights lit up a game that restored English football's confidence a year after Hungary ran riot at Wembley. After some major investment in the very latest lighting at Molineux in 1953, Wolves moved into a different era. The very first floodlit football matches in the UK, a series of games took place against some of the best teams in Europe, including Spartak Moscow, Honved, Moscow Dynamo, Real Madrid and First Vienna. Stan had always been keen that Wolves took on the very best that Europe had to offer, and the photo shows the team heading for Moscow in August 1955, where they would play Dynamo and Spartak. On the front row there you can see Stan Cullis, Billy Wright and the great Bert Williams. Budapest Honved Football Club next in line. On December 13th, 1954, a 55,000 crowd saw Wolves wearing specially designed fluorescent gold shirts fall behind early on to Honved, the Hungarian champions. The photo shows Billy Wright and Ferenc Puskás leading their teams out for what proved to be a memorable night for all who played in the game and for those who watched it. At half-time, losing 2-0, Cullis sent a number of the club's apprentices, including Ron Atkinson, out to water the already wet pitch with the intention of slowing down the Hungarians. The legacy of Wolves' famous victory. Johnny Hancock's pulled one back with a penalty early in the second half, and then, perhaps benefiting from the Cullis training regime, they finished the game strongly with a pair of Roy Swinburne goals securing a memorable win. After the game, Stan said his team were champions of the world, and this comment sparked Europe into action, and Stan received a wonderful telegram from five-time Olympic gold medal hero Jack Beresford, who congratulated Cullis on flying the flag for Britain and putting English sport back where it should be. "What a marvellous performance you put on last night," said Jack Beresford. "Do please accept my heartiest congratulations. I watched the game on television and was absolutely thrilled. We need inspiration like that to put English sport back where it should be, at the top of the world." Jack Beresford was one of the most accomplished rowers in Olympic history. He competed in 5 different summer games, winning a total of 9 medals. This included 3 gold medals, which he won in consecutive games, 1920, 1924 and 28. In addition to his success at the Olympics, Beresford also enjoyed a long and successful career as a professional rower. He won the prestigious Henley Royal Regatta, a record 5 times, and he was also a 3-time world champion. In retirement, Beresford remained active in the sport of rowing. He served as a coach for several British teams, including the 1948 Olympic squad. He was also inducted into the British Olympic Hall of Fame in 2006. The comment sparked a Europe-wide debate, as well as upsetting the French, that's a positive in my eyes, on the merits of teams from various countries competing, and resulted in the creation of the European Cup. The French sporting paper L'Équipe questioned Stan's comment, but the next week, January 1955, Santiago Bernabéu, chairman of Real Madrid, in an open letter to the paper, said the plan to invite league champions to compete on a home and away basis had his full support. In fact, few people will know that the prestigious competition, the European Cup or the Champions League, can trace their origins and roots back to Molineux and Stan Cullis, the passionate Puritan, when it began in September 1955, barely 9 months after Wolves defeated Honved, when 18 invitations were sent out to enter the competition after receiving the backing of FIFA and UEFA. Chelsea were champions of England, but were discouraged by the xenophobic secretary of the Football League, Alan Hardacre, and it took Matt Busby to ignore him and enter Man United in 1956-57. Telegrams pour in, one from the MP representing Wolverhampton South West. Stan received numerous telegrams after the victory over Honved. Enoch Powell, the MP, said, "Congratulations, wonderful win yesterday." Cliff Britton, "Congratulations on another great win." A Luton friend, "Merry Christmas, Wolves, and thanks for kicking the daylight out of the continental teams. Carry on the good work." Another story behind the game. The game against Honved was considered such an event that the BBC broadcast the second half on television. I mistakenly thought it was a full game, but before that only FA Cup finals were deemed worthy. In the last minute, a Honved forward was bearing down on goal, with only Bert Williams to beat to equalise for the Hungarians, only for the BBC to fade out the game to go to another programme, The Band Show. Only the BBC could do anything like that. Thousands of football enthusiasts, angered by the fade-out, hammered every telephone line to broadcasting house for over an hour until the announcer, Adrian Walker, apologised to the watching public. The photo shows a very young Ron Atkinson shaking hands with his hero, Stan Cullis, and it was Stan who ordered all the ground staff, including Ron Atkinson, onto the pitch at half-time with hose pipes and watering cans after 4 days of incessant rain to slow down Honved. Ron said years later, "If Cullis had not taken this action, I think Honved would have won 10-0, and the Daily Mail said the pitch was like a cattle ground at the end of a 4-day show in the rain." Cullis' assistant, Joe Gardner, was talking to one of the Honved coaches after the game, who asked where Wolves got their players from, including Bert Williams, Johnny Hancocks and Dennis Wilshaw. It so happened that all three were recruited from Walsall, who finished second bottom of Division 3 South that year, prompting the Honved coach to say, "I'm just glad we didn't play Walsall tonight." Dynamo in the headlights. On November 9th, 1955, Moscow Dynamo visited Molineux with the legendary Lev Yashin in his famous All Black strip, one of the most celebrated footballers on earth, as their goalkeeper. Bill Slater recalled many years later that there was a series of matches against Yashin. What a goalkeeper and a character he was. It was a huge privilege to have scored against him. Within 15 minutes, he was picking the ball out of the net, scored by Bill Slater. And Jimmy Mullen added a second in the 49th minute before Ilyin reduced the arrears for the Russians in a 2-1 defeat. I think Bill Slater was the last amateur to play for England. Wolves had played Dynamo in Moscow in August 1955, losing 3-2 with a brace from Dennis Wilshaw. Journalist Roy Pescott wrote at the time, "If Wolves are not the best team in the world, then can be no greater fighters." In modern laws of the game, Wolves would have won the two-legged fixture with Dynamo on away goals. Spartak next on the list. I can't quite read that headline in the paper. November 16th, 1954, and Wolverhampton Wanderers defeated Spartak Moscow 4-0 at Molineux, a team widely regarded as one of the finest in the world. In August 1955, Wolves were in Moscow to play Spartak and came away on the wrong end of a 3-0 scoreline. The photo shows the great Bert Williams safely collecting a cross. Once again, with modern laws in European competition, Wolves would have won 4-3 on aggregate. Real Madrid host Wolves in 1957. Real Madrid, who won the first 2 European Cups and would go on to win a further 3, hosted Wolves in the autumn of 1957. Wolves in front of 110,000 crowd at the Charlton Stadium emerged with a creditable 2-2 draw with goals from Bobby Mason and Jimmy Mullen. Mason said the crowd lit candles in mourning for their team as they had never been beaten or drawn at home to foreign opposition. Wolves felt both Madrid goals were offside, and Norman Dealey hit the bar with a fierce shot in the last few minutes. Stan Cullis was delighted with the performance of his boys. Return game with Real at Molineux. Stan thought Alfredo Di Stefano had the best balance of any footballer in the world as Wolves faced the continental champions under the Molineux floodlights on Thursday, October 17, 1957. In front of a packed stadium with Di Stefano leading the Madrid attack, Wolves triumphed 3-2. In effect, they won 5-4 on aggregate over 2 legs against a team that was to win the European Cup 5 times in succession. Even more than the victory against Budapest Honved, this was perhaps the final single achievement of the Iron manager. Although Cullis' team never won the European Cup, Stan later explained, "My ambition as manager was to win the First Division, not the European Cup. Until I became manager, Wolves had never won the league, but we won it in 1954, 58 and 59 by playing attacking football, which was my whole philosophy. In the late 1950s, we scored more than 100 goals 4 years in succession. Of course, that made us vulnerable at the back, but that was our style. And that sort of philosophy is what attracts football fans to ground. There is no substitute for all that attacking football. As Danny Blanchflower, the skipper of Spurs, once said, if they score 4, we will score 5. Could Wolves win a hat-trick of titles? You can see there that the great teams that were played, who played for Wolves, they wouldn't be successful in winning 3 games, 3 titles on the trot. The FA Cup victory in 1960 was known as the Dustbin Final. Wolves finished second in the league and missed the double by a single point to a fine Burnley team, with the resurgent Spurs in third. They did, however, lift the FA Cup with a 3-0 victory over Blackburn Rovers in sweltering heat. After 41 minutes, Wolves took the lead with an own goal by Mick McGrath, and 2 minutes later, Rovers fullback Dave Whelan fractured his leg in a tackle with Norman Dealey. After 68 and 88 minutes, Dealey scored twice to win the cup for Wolves for the 4th time in their history, and they have not won another since. That's up to 2023. The game was also known as the Dustbin Final due to the game being classed as rubbish, but also for the bad reaction of the Blackburn fans to the Wolves players, who were pelted with programmes, paper cups and other rubbish accumulated in the stands. Dave Whelan sadly always said that Norman Dealey went over the top in the tackle that broke his leg. And 2 years later, when he was attempting a comeback in a pre-season game against Preston, he was marking Tom Finney, who said to Whelan before the game, "I'm not going to test you today, son, because I want to see you back in the first team at Blackburn." Now, sadly, that never happened, and Dave went to Crewe Alexandra from 62 to 66, playing 115 games before retiring at the age of 30. Before the game, Derek Dougan, the Blackburn centre-forward, handed in a transfer request on the way to Wembley, so I will never be doing a talk on Derek Dougan. "You only have one life, and I gave mine to Wolves." That's what Stan said. In September '64, after a 16th place finish in the previous season, Stan Cullis missed 5 of the team's first 7 games due to illness, and when he returned, the new chairman, John Ireland, sacked him. Stan said, Ireland obviously enjoyed sacking me, but I had created a yardstick which people could criticise me against. After a while he returned to manage Birmingham City, but the spark had gone and he retired in 1970. Stan passed away peacefully in 2001 and was honoured by Wolves for 30 years service with the naming of a stand and the building of a statue at Molyneux, which you can see there. It was a callous and cowardly act. For 30 years he served Wolverhampton Wanderers, and at the end the chairman, John Ireland, didn't have the courage to face him like a man and ask Stan to return his keys to the club. I suppose that's what you would expect from a former second-hand car salesman. Apologies to any car salesman present. The words in the letter sent by his secretary Jack Howley read as follows. Dear Stan, I've been instructed by the chairman to request you to let me have your keys of the club. Yours sincerely, Jack. Stan's title of manager at the top of the letter had a series of crosses to remove his name. I think they broke the mould when Stan was born. Few men have made a greater impact on football than Stan Cullis. The dramatic claim that his Wolves team were champions of the world after beating Honved in 1954 sparked the creation of the European Cup. Cullis was a great player, described by Ferenc Puskás earlier as being the most classical centre-half of his time. He won 3 Football League Championships and 2 FA Cups, thanks to his long ball tactics that provoked endless controversy. His reputation was worldwide, and when Wolves brutally sacked him in 1964, the first offer of a new job came from Italian club Juventus, which he turned down, and very few people can say that apart from the great Jimmy Murphy. He only missed out on winning a First Division Championship medal because he refused to foul Albert Stubbins, the Liverpool centre forward. That sort of behaviour was not in Stan's DNA. A late news flash, I discovered that justice was done at last for Stan Cullis when a fanatical Wolves supporter who watched his first game aged 5, Sir Jack Hayward, became owner of Wolves from 1990 to 2007. Sir Jack renamed the John Ireland stand, which had stood from 1979 to 2003, the Steve Bull stand, finally erasing the hated name of John Ireland. Molyneux originates from Benjamin Molyneux, a local merchant and a relative of the extinct Earls of Sefton, who in 1744 purchased land on which Molyneux House was built and eventually became the stadium it is today. The 4 stands at Molyneux are therefore named the Jack Hayward, the Stan Cullis, the Billy Wright and the Steve Bull, all people who had old gold running through their veins, and the name of John Ireland has been dispatched forever into the dustbin. A final tribute from the great Bill Shankly. In his 1976 autobiography, Bill Shankly paid high tribute to Stan, saying, "While Stan was volatile and outrageous in what he said, he never swore, and he could be as soft as mash. He would give you his last penny. Stan was 100% Wolverhampton Wanderers. His blood must have been of old gold. He would have died for Wolves. Above all, Stan is a very clever man who could have been successful at anything. When he left Wolverhampton, I think his heart was broken, and he thought the whole world had come down on top of him. All round, as a player, as a manager, and for general intelligence, it would be very difficult, if not impossible, to name anyone since the game began who would qualify to be in the same class as Stan Cullis." It's immaterial what I think of the players and managers in my talks, but when you hear an opinion from inside the game and from someone as revered as Bill Shankly, it's the icing on the cake.